that's not good.
All right, so this project did not go as expected at all. So behind me booting up is my Dolch PAC-64 that I've been working on. Currently has Windows 95 installed on it, as you can hear. And inside of it is a Voodoo 3. In addition to that, I have a TNT2 that I want to actually put in this also. So the original idea with this computer was to actually put a Voodoo 2 in it. But how do you put a Voodoo 2 in a computer that has a built-in VGA card? It's a normal chips and technologies, nothing special, PCI graphics card. And then there's a digital interface inside on that card that then goes to the VGA controller. My bright idea, after I figured out that I could not easily, at least, figure out what the pinout on that connector is, that was my original idea, was to see if because apparently the interface is similar to DVI. It's got the same pins, some of the same pins. So I was thinking, okay, well maybe that could work if I can figure out what the pinout of the ribbon cable is. But that didn't work. So I was like, okay, well maybe I can, well my backup was to see if I could take a DVI cable and then pull it apart, figure out what that pinout is and hook it up that way. That didn't really pan out. So I was like, okay, well, I'll order a 12.1 inch LCD, which has VGA, HDMI, DVI ports on it, figure out where I can mount it inside this, and then I would have normal inputs. And then from there, I could take a video card like this guy here, which has a built-in VGA port. And I was thinking, okay, well, maybe I could plug this into the, just take the VGA connector off, adapt it if I need to, and just plug it directly into the display driver board. Unfortunately, that didn't really work either, because this video card and this PCI video card, this one is a 9250. I think this one's like a 9270 or 20 or something like that. I honestly don't remember. And the computer just would not post with those installed. Dang it. Okay, so finally I took the original PC and chips, or sorry, chips and technologies video card, still has the plastic on the back, and I put it in the computer, and sure enough, it booted right up. I plugged the VGA from this, looped it inside the computer, plugged it into the LCD controller, and it worked. So as you'll see, I'm kind of recording this out of order because this project has taken me weeks to do. I honestly been working on this for about a month in my free time. So I was like, okay, well, maybe my fallback was I'll use this, it'll loop out, plug into my other Voodoo 2. This is a Voodoo 2 8 meg. The other one that I have in my Voodoo 2 build video, that's a 12 meg, but this one still works perfectly fine. And thankfully it did work. I hadn't tested it. A friend of mine gave this to me. So I did that, looped that in, plugged it into the controller board, and it worked. This barely fit though, because inside the PAC-64, there's a optical drive, and then on the back of that optical drive is a little adapter board that goes from the little tiny IDE optical to like this normal 40-pin IDE interface. And this actually touched the back of that. You could kind of scrape it back and forth. So that was not cool, but it did work. And then I was talking with a friend of mine who lives down across town, and I was like, hey, here's the situation. And we were just talking about this and that. And he was like, oh, I got a Voodoo 3. And I was like, well, yeah, but it's gonna be AGP. And he's like, no, I think it's PCI. So while I'm chatting with him online, I'm like pulling up eBay and I'm seeing like, okay, how common is the PCI Voodoo 3? And I only found one listing that had closed like a month ago for over $250. And I was like, there's no way he has this. He sends me a picture, the unicorn Voodoo 3, which is inside here. You'll see it later. And I'm like, that could be perfect, because then I can free up a PCI slot, kind of shuffle things around, clean things up, and it would work really well. The downside is I do still need to go VGA and then loop it inside through an expansion slot and then plug it into the driver board. So you're gonna see kind of little bits and pieces of me putting this together while I'll like work on it for a little bit, and then I'll show kind of an update of where I'm at. And then it was so frustrating, and my backup plan of my backup plan of my backup plan kind of kept failing. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I need to order this thing off eBay, and oh, I need this cable off Amazon, and whatever, you know, and I'd have to order something and wait a few days, and then oh, it wouldn't work, or I needed to change tactics to make all this fit. So, man, it has been a journey, but unlike any other PAC-64 that I think might exist, this PAC-64 has built-in hardware accelerated Voodoo 3 on the built-in display. Because I've seen videos in the past where people have taken like a Voodoo 2 or something like that, plugged it in, and then, oh, I want to play a game, I have to plug it into an external monitor. So this is what I've been working on. So you'll see little updates, and then I finally kind of stopped recording. So you'll see that. You might see my ugly face again, and then you're gonna see a couple of benchmarks, because during this whole process, I had actually ordered a TNT 2 instead of using the Voodoo 2. I was thinking, okay, well, that's gonna be a lot faster. It's PCI, it's old enough, it should post. And then like a couple hours later, I was talking to my friend, and he said, oh, I've got this Voodoo 3. So I basically was like, okay, well, I could use a TNT 2. Nice to have something spare. It's new old stock. Don't ask me from where, and it should work. So what I want to do is I want to benchmark. This is a Pentium 200. I want to benchmark the TNT 2 against the Voodoo 3 and just kind of see how they compare. I only really have a few games installed, so we'll just check out Quake 1 and Quake 2. I also have Half-Life installed, but that apparently doesn't have a built-in benchmark. So we'll just do Quake 1 and Quake 2 as a quick comparison, and then we'll finish up the video. Because a Voodoo 3 is a Voodoo 3, and especially given the age of this computer and that kind of how prevalent Glide was back in the mid to late 90s, I will most likely be leaving the Voodoo 3 in this computer as its permanent home, because it does work great. So come along. Thanks to the magic of editing, you'll see this go through hopefully really fast. Yeah, I can always use some constructive feedback if you have any. I also love reading everybody's comments. Everybody's just been really positive. Yeah, hopefully you'll enjoy this. If you enjoy it, feel free to stick that thumbs up. I hate asking, I feel weird asking, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Okay, we are back with another 90s Tech video, and this time with my Dolch PAC-64 restoration mod project. Basically, what I want to do is I want to turn this into a portable retro gaming PC. It kind of technically already is, in that it's a Pentium 200. It's got 64 megabytes of RAM. It's running Windows 95 right now, if I remember correctly. Might be running 98. Well, it's not running anything at the moment because the hard drive seems to have died. I'm still going to attempt to get data off of the drive because it's got some drivers and things like that. Although there's nothing really super duper special about the motherboard inside this computer. This thing was really mainly built with off-the-shelf parts for the most part. It's got a lovely Cherry MX key switch mechanical keyboard. It's got an LCD and controller by Gold Star, pretty standard, if not oddball size motherboard right behind the LCD, which I'll show after I get the covers and stuff off. And what I originally wanted to do is I wanted to add a Voodoo 2 to this computer because I think that would make a great add-on. I also wanted to replace the fans in the power supply and the exhaust fan. Exhaust fans over here on this side. Just see if I could do that. But unfortunately, there really wasn't a way to add any kind of VGA to this without using an external monitor. The LCD panel uses a internal ribbon cable with a digital signal that comes off the PC and chips video card that's in here, and the chips card is, again, nothing special. It does 2D. I mean, this thing is really a workhorse. It's not a computer that you would typically sit down and like do email on and browse the web and things like that. This was a piece of testing equipment that happens to be a computer. And you know, these suitcase style computers were not very common in the mid 90s. That was kind of more of an early luggable type of a form factor. But It's got a 12.1 inch TFT display. You know, of course, the luggables from back in the day used CRTs, and it was a packet network packet sniffer of some kind. So I was like, okay, fine. Let's see if I can add a video card and then adapt the digital interface ribbon inside, as it is based off of DVI. It's like an earlier implementation of DVI. And so I did some research on that, and I wasn't able to figure out what the pinout was. I think that would be possible, but I was not able to figure out what the pinout was on that video card. It didn't seem to follow any of the diagrams that I could find online. So I was like, okay, well, I think the only way that I can adapt this and add my own video card is to replace the LCD screen and driver board. So enter this 800 by 600 TN panel and control board with a little control panel add-on doodad with the buttons on it. So my hope is that I can install this in the PAC-64 without too much hassle. But what's really cool about this is that the control board has VGA, DVI, HDMI, has audio outs here. I think one of these might be digital, but I can't remember. And yeah, and it actually does good scaling and everything like that. I've already tested it with DVI and VGA to make sure that it will scale properly. I want to be able to put this in the Dolch PAC-64 and not worry about, you know, getting native text resolution and I get this little teeny postage stamp of video in the middle of the LCD. It actually scales really nicely. So that's the plan. I'm going to go ahead, open this baby up and show you what it looks like on the inside. I'm not going to really walk through the disassembly of this. There's already a few videos online on how to pull one of these apart. I will link those in the description below. I will also link the exact part number I used for this LCD if you want to attempt this yourself. I don't even know if this will work yet at the time of this recording. This is all kind of guesswork. But if you want to try this yourself, maybe when we get to the end of all this, after an episode or 3, that you'll be like, yeah, I want to try that on my PAC-64. I will never, unless I had an empty shell, I would never personally attempt to put a normal modern computer into one of these. Although there is a really good video that a YouTube channel called BitSplits did, where he was extremely creative in how he went about modernizing one of these. The one he had, as far as I could tell, worked fine, but it had a broken LCD and a couple of the keys, or at least one key on the keyboard, was missing. So I don't know, I would have just put a new LCD in it and called it done, but you know, different projects for different people. So come along with me and let's see if we can get this to work. Okay, a little bit of time has passed and I have this machine pretty gutted. As you can see, there is a Dallas clock there. The Dallas clock is currently holding time, so for now, I'm gonna leave it alone. If there's a way to add a battery without doing a battery-ectomy on the Dallas clock, I will absolutely do that. But for now, I guess I will leave the Dallas clock alone. My other plan is to replace that CPU cooler with normal CPU cooler. The reason why that CPU cooler is there and super ultra duper low profile is apparently, I'm just guessing based on how I'm looking at this, is that this computer could take some full-length cards, and that would be in the way. None of the cards that I have should be too long for that CPU cooler, and it should just fit behind the optical drive assembly, which is this guy right here. So we've got our hard drive, floppy drive. I am gonna take this apart and clean it, although I know it does work. And then this is our normal optical drive. Annoyingly, this whole armature here is glued in solid. I could heat this and melt the glue and pull this apart, but I really don't need to. I can just take this whole assembly off because this hard drive is going to get replaced. I need to try and recover the data off of it anyway. So yeah, the next part is to get the front of the machine off and then see how much of a giant pain it's going to be to mount that new LCD panel. All right, checking in yet again. We've got the entire plastic cover off of the PAC-64. This is the front, And here's the original 800 by 600 LCD. The driver board is right here. If we flip her around, we can see we're still pretty emptied out here. This is the video cable here. One of the two, or sorry, this is the floppy drive ribbon. Pretty soon here we're gonna see what all can fit. I am guessing, and by guessing I mean pretty damn sure at this point, that this LCD should fit here. That I'm not so worried about. So here's the LCD right there. The control board though may or may not fit right here. My hope is that it'll fit behind the LCD a little bit. If that's the case, I'm gonna need to make the hole a little bit wider. If I can fit the control board here, shoot, this is gonna be really hard. I think what's gonna end up happening is I'm gonna have to put the control board back here, make a hole. This is aluminum, as I understand. It's weird looking aluminum, but it is aluminum. But I think I might have to put the control board on top, inside, right here, and I will need to drill a couple of holes to do that. I got to be careful because these are the handle holes here, and then the ribbon will have to go through here. There might be a hole up here, or maybe I'll have to drill one to put the cable through to make sure everything reaches. There's not a lot of free space inside here. I'm planning on reusing this speaker and wiring it directly to the sound card. And again, I'm going to be using cables and plugs and stuff like that, as you'll see as this build progresses. Next step is to take the LCD panel off, but I couldn't get a really good view of what the mounts look like on here. My hope is that I can just clamp this thing down inside. I don't think it's going to be that easy. That's probably going to be where this project stops until I can figure out how to mount these corners. But my hope is that I can fabricate something either with metal or design and 3D print something. I'm not a great 3D model designer, even for like little square parts, but give it a try, even if I gotta, hot glue it in place or something like that. So we shall see. All right, we are now at the back of the LCD panel. Just like any other LCD, it has very custom looking mounts on it here. So looking at this from the back, this is the left side. I think that's the power board there. Yep. So nice and clean. I like all the little clips. That's probably the controller. So I will need to figure out how to mount this. This is pretty custom. I don't know exactly how the LCD is going to sit in here. So next time we come back, I'm going to have this all out, and I'm just going to kind of lay the new LCD in here and see how things fit. Again, there's a nice close-up view. Do I know how to use a camera? But yeah, there's a decently close-up view in 4K of what these mounts look like. So let's get all this out. And this is fairly deep. You can kind of see here, there's a good, I'd say at least a ½ inch, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 centimeters, something like that. So yeah, we'll be back shortly with all this out, and we'll see how the LCD fits in here. We are back and more work has been done. Motherboard is out, and I think I have a solution for the LCD mount and where to put the control board. Yay. So what's gonna happen is the control board is gonna live right here. I do need to hard mount this, however, or would prefer to. Actually, no, I kind of have to, but it doesn't need to pop up very much. And I want it to be fairly far back. Obviously the motherboard's not in here right now, but there's gonna be an ISA slot right about there. So this cable that goes to the LCD itself, I think I could slot it through this little hole here, and I think there's enough slack that it can come around on the other side and plug into the edge of the LCD, which is right about here, thankfully. So that'll just run along there, go along kind of behind the ISA and PCI slots, and then tuck in there. Getting this motherboard out was a giant pain. You can see all these little slider doodads move in different directions, or the little standoffs. So I had to just kind of squeeze each one and lift and pull and pick and tug. I did have to put the case back on because I needed to see how much spacing I needed This is the 2 screws that hold the handle in, and it's already sunk in, so I just need to make sure that when I mount the control board over here on the other side, there's just enough space for these 2 screws over on this side. The control board's traces will be facing down towards that area, so I just need to make sure I have enough of a standoff there that none of these traces can touch. It'll be over on the other side, but that none of these traces can touch either the aluminum or these 2. I might even see if I can maybe jam a piece of cardboard or something in here. There are 4 mounting points on this board. I'll probably go ahead and use all 4 of them just to make sure that this board is as rigid as possible. Yeah, I'm gonna have to be really careful. In fact, I should have marked this off before I put the before I took the motherboard out, but I'll figure that one out. So that's where we are right now on this build. I was about to take this off, and I realized we got to do the peel. So good. Okay, it's been a few hours and I've taken a lunch break, and I think we are good on the LCD. So I'm just gonna pan down here. We're gonna zoom in a bit, and we'll start off with this little 3D printed part right here. It's just a little teeny little bracket thingy that I found on Thingiverse. So there's one there, there's another one right there. And that seems like it's holding up just fine. Those are the stock screws. They're just M3 screws. Luckily, most of this thing is just totally off the shelf. And then over here are, again, just 2 of the existing screws. One there and one there. Really awesome. So that looks like it's good. And then on the main frame of this build, I did have to drill some holes. So I've got these M2 nylon nuts and bolts, and I have this right there, and that is on there really well. Like, I can hold the case by this, so it's got 4 points of contact, and I think it'll just reach. Once I get the motherboard in, I'll have a better idea, but for now this should reach far enough for me to then plug that in, and then I should be able to snug this up a little bit and get just a little bit of slack, and then it's gonna have to like go under a card or 2, but hopefully this will reach. There's the other end of that ribbon cable. We should be good to go. So I am excited about that. I'm gonna mount this, and again, I'm not gonna film it just because it's a pain, but once I get this mounted, we'll be right back, and I'll just do an initial test. I wanna make sure that I don't have too much pressure on this LCD causing it to rainbow or cause any goofy problems or anything like that. All right, LCD screen is installed. There's also a little speaker that I've installed right back here where the old control board used to be. That's gonna get plugged into the sound card, and we're ready to test. So right now I have this hooked up via VGA to a little eMachines computer I have over here that I'm working on for a different video. So I'm gonna turn that machine on and see what happens. You know what, let's turn the LCD on first. I'm doing all this for the first time along with you. Okay, LCD has power. All right, excellent. And I'm not seeing anything pinched, so that's good. Now this is VGA. When this is all set up and done, this will be DVI. All right, Windows 98 eMachines machine is now powered on. Oh shoot. There we go. This is still going through my VGA splitter, and the splitter was powered off. So yeah, it looks good. The LCD is shifted ever so slightly to the left. Just has to do with the way that it fit in here. It's kind of ironic since this computer will be running Windows 98. It probably should run Windows 95. I think 98's a hair too new. Worst case scenario, I can redo this with VGA. Shouldn't be too hard, might be easier in some ways. And I think the computer locked up because it's a crappy eMachines. On the plus side, it works. Yep, hard lock. All right, attempt number 2. And this is without the control panel buttons connected. You know, are getting a little bit of light bleed here. And it hard locked again. Man, I'm just having no luck with computers today. All right, well, test concluded. I was really hoping to see a desktop and like a nice 800x600 picture, but for whatever reason, this eMachines is not cooperating today. Maybe it's because I have the mouse unplugged, I don't know. But all right, we gotta continue. We gotta put the motherboard in and we gotta wire a bunch of stuff up and see if this thing still works. All right, we're actually on day 3 of this build. I didn't spend all day on it, but I spent as much time as I could. And I wanted to pause here to just kind of give an update on where I am on this build. Right now we're looking at the power supply, which I've pulled open. And this power supply is actually really neatly engineered. So over here, we've got this side, and this actually just kind of links up in here, goes like that, and then you have these 2 plugs here that plug in right there. And so you just unplug those. This kind of leans down, and I accidentally plugged it in a little bit, so we'll get that out of there. So originally I opened this just to see if maybe I could take this fan, spin it around, because I want this fan to be an intake, and then I want the fan on the top of the Dolch, the PAC-65, the one that's right here. I want that one to be an exhaust. That way you have cool air coming in from the bottom, warm air exhausting out of the top, since I will be adding quite a bit of load to the system. Things have also kind of changed a little bit. My original plan was to use this video card, take the VGA off of here, and run it directly to the control board for the LCD that I've installed now that's mounted up here. But this computer will not post with this more modern video card in it. I mean, geez, this thing's got DVI. So that didn't work. And I'm like, okay, well, what else do I have? Well, I've got this thing, this some other random ATI card. And I was like, oh yeah, this will work because it's got the VGA. Also won't post with that, so forget that. So I finally gave up and I put the PC Chips video card, original video card back in, and I'm like, all right, fine, I guess I'll use my other Voodoo 2. So this will actually be kind of a more awesome setup because I'm gonna have a portable Voodoo 2 gaming rig. Right here is a 3D printed bracket with a low profile 70mm fan on it. That I need to maybe fix. That's no good. All right, well, you know, YouTube life. And then right here is just a placeholder. This is a SoundBlaster 16 value. I want to put an AWE-64 in here since this will be doing a lot of DOS gaming in addition to Windows 95 gaming. And that's really the big benefit of going with the Voodoo 2 is that I can go ahead and keep running Windows 95 on this. It's got 64 megs of RAM, which I think will be fine. Anyway, so that's where we are on this guy here. Pretty excited. Things are starting to come together. I soldered together an adapter on the CPU fan because this fan originally didn't come with a 3-pin connector. It came with a Molex. I actually reused that Molex down here to control this fan up here. I also soldered together a adapter to go from a barrel connector to the Molex connector here so that I can run the, of course, LCD off of the built-in control panel. But why the heck do I have the power supply apart? Well, like I said earlier, I wanted to just reverse this fan. Some of these older power supplies, the fans are socketed. In this case, this one is. So this is my last 80mm Arctic F8. These are supposedly fluid dynamic bearing fans. I've used these fans in tons and tons of different things. They've never let me down. Arctic's been around a long time. I'm a big fan of them. I think I've talked about them in previous videos. Anyway, so I think what I'm gonna actually do is this fan's actually not that loud, really. It is at full blast, but it seems like it's thermally controlled by the power supply because it kind of spins up hard and then calms back down a little bit. So that said though, it's an old fan. Let's go ahead and get it out of here, and I'm going to replace it with the new one, but I'm going to have it facing inwards instead of exhaust. That way that'll blow direct cold air over all these components, which are really going to need it. Quick side note, don't go into a power supply, a PC power supply, unless you know what you're doing. Really the main thing with this is just don't touch anything, especially if it's got a capacitor. These things can keep a charge in them for quite a while. This one's been sitting overnight. It's probably safe, but I'm still being very careful not to touch anything that I shouldn't. Yeah, and while I had it open, I've been looking at all the capacitors and all the components, and everything seems like it's in good shape. So, well-made power supply. So that's where we are right now. When we come back, I'm gonna have this largely assembled. This is where we are. So this is update, what, 5 or 6? I don't know, I lost count. Okay, we are looking at the business end of the Dolch PAC-64. Things are pretty darn crammed in here. I thought I would take this opportunity to give you a quick tour of what I've done and the sort of the semi-final form of this computer before it gets all buttoned up and becomes a hardware accelerated portable Windows 95 gaming system from its former life as a network analyzer. So this is the Voodoo 3 PCI that a friend of mine gave me. This is a 3D printed bracket that I customized and printed. Has a low profile 70mm fan on it. Attached to that fan is a fan silencer. It's really just a little resistor that sits in line. So that blows a little bit of air across the video card along the heatsink. These do tend to run a little bit hot, so I like the idea of a little bit of airflow going over that video card. Up here is a fairly standard ISA AWE 64. I have 2 of these. I bought them last year, and unfortunately the prices have gone up quite a bit. I got a pretty good deal. I got 2 of these for about 45 bucks shipped. Now they cost about $45 each, which is still, you know, in my opinion, if you like the sound of the AWE64, even the, you know, kind of more common one, I think it's worth it personally. I also didn't like the low profile heatsink that was on the Pentium 200, and since I'm going to be playing other games that aren't necessarily hardware accelerated, I wanted to put a bigger heatsink on here, and it just barely fits underneath the optical drive. This is just a standard new old stock. I'm not sure where these come from, but I've got a few of these Avid coolers, and they work really well. It's got MX4 Arctic MX4 thermal compound on it, modern compound, and then there's another fan quieter doodad here. Well, okay, so this used to be set up a little bit differently, where it would exhaust hot air from this side, and then it would bring in cool air from up here. But I've actually turned this around, so now the power supply pulls in fresh air and provides just a little tiny bit. I mean, it's so crammed in there, it's not even funny. Provides a little bit of airflow to come out here and then exhaust here. And I figured since heat rises, and this system will probably be running a little bit hotter than it was when it was a network analyzer, that replacing these fans with quieter ones, more modern fans. This is an Arctic 80mm fluid dynamic bearing fan here. And then this is a Guile, I think is the brand, ball bearing silent fan that's up here. The only other thing I did in here was replace the hard drive with a ide-sd adapter, which is crammed in here. I actually have it in the box that this exhaust fan came in. So let's tilt this up so you can get a little bit better of a look here. So if we tilt this way a little bit, so you can see there's that Guile fan right there. Right here is the LCD driver board. And then this little ribbon here is to plug in the button panel, which I may still try and figure out a way to maybe mod it into one of the one of the expansion slots over here. But honestly, it's been fine. Oddly, when I had the Voodoo 2 in here, the LCD which is a Gold Star LCD. I forget the exact model number. Again, check the description of the video to get more info on that, what I used. It would put a big black border around anything that wasn't 800 by 600. But with this video card, the Voodoo 3, that problem went away. And I did testing before I installed all this. I plugged it into the Celeron machine that I have over here that I've been doing some testing on, and it worked perfectly fine. I could run it at 320 by 200, 640 by 480, 800 by 600. Heck, I even ran it at higher resolutions than that, and it scaled all of them to full screen, basically. So I don't know what their differences are, but that's the way it goes. This VGA cable is the one that I was using with my VGA capture. I decided to repurpose it and stuff it in here. It's kind of kinked at nasty angles, but it's not gonna get moved around too much, so I'm hoping it'll last. I can always get a replacement. But one nice thing about this too is it's got a toroid on either end to help with noise and stuff like that. So yeah, that's basically it. There's also one more usable PCI slot like stuffed way down in there. I've lost one PCI slot here where the ISA AWE 64 goes, and I also can't really use the ISA slot. I might be able to make it work if I really needed to, and I could maybe use the ISA slot that's buried between the LCD driver and the sound card. But I'm using its expansion slot here to pass the VGA through. It's just kind of a mess. Everything about this build was a trade-off. In the benchmarks that you saw, the first benchmarks, you heard some sound. And what that actually came from, if we rotate a little more over here, okay, there's the sound card there, and then you see this audio cable. What I did is I customized that, and I have both left and right channels mushed together and running to a single speaker that I have glued inside in the one empty free spot that I could find that worked. Anyway, so that's what's going on. So let's go ahead and we will get this video card out of here and put in the TNT2. Well, like so many things with this project, the TNT2 and this computer don't seem to get along. So what you're seeing here is the burn-in test that's built into the VGA driver. And it's making my camera white balance not happy at all. Anyway, so yeah. Okay, we are hunkered up nice and close to our wonderful Dolch PAC-64. And I have this kind of cheesy wallpaper here just to give the camera something to white balance a little better against. So we're gonna go ahead and run plain old boring 640 by 480 GL Quake. And then we're going to benchmark it. Oh, lovely. Time demo 1, wasn't it? Boom, not bad. So the Voodoo 3 scored 69.5 FPS at 640 by 480. So let's try 800 by 600, which I think works. I can't remember, this might not work. But this is the native res of this replacement panel that I got. Parts will be in the description below the video, of course. Yep, 800 by 600. Butter. Oh no. All right, 70.1 FPS at 800 by 600. All right, and unfortunately, I don't think this needs the CD. Here's Quake 2. Again, this is the Voodoo 3. Taking a little while to load. So this looks like it's running at 800 by 600. All right, so let's see here. Time demo 1, map demo 1.dm2. So 37.4 FPS on average. Not bad. All right, so that's at 800 by 600. This is Quake 3.2. All right, so let's go back to 640 by 480. Please don't crash. All right, let's run it again. $37.3, so not a huge uplift from 800 by 600. Although I think for Quake 2 with this system, with this 3D card, I'd probably just go ahead and run it at 640 by 480 just to keep that above 30 experience, because it looks like it would drop below 30 occasionally. Like when, at the very end of the last benchmark, you'll notice that when the explosions happen, that tends to hit older video cards pretty hard, and it got a little framey right there towards the end. But you know, it's Quake 2, it's an old system, kind of part of the experience, right? Wow, you made it to the end. I don't usually do outro videos, but I think this one deserved an outro. So here's my Dolch PAC-64. It looks reasonably stock. Oh, it's maybe a little bit heavier. Do have some extra cabling here on the side, but I think it's reasonably neat. Got the built-in Cherry MX keyboard, optical drive and floppy on the side, and then of course we have our normal stickers and stuff like that on the back. So if we open this up, it's not plugged in at the moment, but yeah, it basically looks completely stock. The only thing I don't really like is because the LCD is shifted slightly, this wasn't really designed to be in here. There is a little bit of a metal bar here from this aftermarket LCD that's now installed. So this video is plenty long, so I don't want to spend too much time on the outro on this. Thanks for watching all the way to the very end. If you have any similar projects or know of anybody else who's done this to a Dolch PAC-64 or similar machine, I'd love to hear about it. Or maybe a link to another YouTube video, that would be super awesome. And if you have any other wacky retro projects you want to put down in the comments, I'd love to hear about those too. This is not the last you're going to see of this machine. I'm probably going to stick a network card in it at some point, but really, I don't think it needs it. I think using serial to connect two 95 machines together to do 1v1 type games, if there's any multiplayer at all, I think it would be super awesome. Again, thanks for watching. Keep it 90s, and we'll see you on the next one.